Hey folks, Pat here from DNS. This Madison area fishing report is current as of October 20th. Just a couple things to cover here quick. The salmon are running up the tributaries along Lake Michigan on the east coast over there. We're super exciting time of year. Nothing. I got the Thiensville fish camera up here. Nothing coming through right now, but I promise you I've seen salmon the last couple days coming through there. So we'll talk about all that stuff later, but I just want to remind folks that this is a cool resource. I keep it up running here at the shop most times this time of year, and it's just cool to see what's going on and see some of those real impressive fish swimming up the river. Capital City chapter of Muskies Inc. posted this last week on their Facebook page, but they will be stocking muskies. They got 500 Leech Lake muskies. They're going to be dropping off at Olin Park Boat Launch at 8:30 on the 27th, so that's next Friday. And they say people can come down and watch or assist, but I'm sure watching is plenty. It's just a cool opportunity to see some of these adorable little muskies getting released into the lake, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank the Capital City chapter of Muskies for doing that and keeping the great fishery we have here going strong. A little bit of shop news here. If you look around the shop lately, you might think we're going out of business. I assure you that is not the case. We are just getting ready for ice season, so clearing some stuff out. Going to be repopulating these shelves with some ice stuff. I got here's a shot of the Jig and Wraps wall, getting some of those organized over there, and yeah, lots of exciting stuff going to be coming up. Put up on the walls here, so stay tuned for some of that. I also made a post about this yesterday, actually, but happy to announce the DNS Winter Seminar Series lineup. We'll be doing these Thursdays at 7 p.m. here at the shop. So on November 30th, we have Rick Kruger, RK Diver, as he's known online. Just had a real great article about him in Madison Magazine. He's super well known, super knowledgeable about things that are all underwater on the Madison chain. And so he's a scuba diver that knows all kinds of spots that you don't. So he's going to be talking about interesting things he's found and places that hold fish that a lot of people don't know about. Noah Humfeld's going to be doing a talk on December 7th on toothy critters on the Madison chain. And then Pat Westberg's going to be coming through on the 14th talking about plastics for panfish through the ice. So happy to get that out there, and happy to continue that awesome tradition that Gene did for many years. I guess as far as the report goes, we can get started on that. Oh, got to get rid of my ugly face here, and we'll just run the old avatar. There you go. And we have had a pretty mellow week this last week weather-wise with seasonal temps in the upper 50s. Weekend looks great, and they're predicting more of the same into next week with temps dropping as we go into next weekend. The Mendota buoy, of course, is still down, will be until the spring, but another online resource had temps at 57 degrees. Another resource down here in Brittingham Bay had water temps at 52 degrees earlier this week. Yeah, so the temperature gauge down here on Brittingham Bay was reading 52 degrees this morning. But yeah, a lot of folks coming in the shop are asking about turnover. Of course, turnover is when that warm water that's on the surface from the summertime cools down and mixes with the water below it. So Clean Lakes Alliance has a nice article on their website about turnover. They got a little graph here that kind of explains it. But basically, when the water gets to that 50 to 55 degree range, that's when turnover happens. With the temps, on Mendota being at 57, we're really close there. I have heard that Lake Kiganza on the south end of the chain has turned over. So, Lake Wabiso won't be far behind it. Then Monona and Mendota is always the last one to go. But without the buoy out here, we don't have any real accurate way to guarantee that it's turned over. So I'm just relying on word of mouth. If you have any questions or want updates on that, feel free to call the shop 241-4225, and we can try to update you with what we know here. Generally around the chain, weeds are becoming less of a problem as they continue to die back. Water clarity can vary greatly depending on turnover. It can be pea soup out there like it was earlier this week on Kiganza. Otherwise, it can be not too bad depending on where you're at. Otherwise, these cooler temps has fish settling into their fall patterns. Nice gills are being found on weed lines and mid-lake humps on Lake Mendota, but for the most part, suspended gills we saw all summer on the rest of the chain have moved into shallow areas. Outside of tiny fish, perch action remains basically non-existent on Mendota and elsewhere. Largemouth bass are still shallow around the chain, and smallmouth bass have really been snapping on Lake Mendota lately. Walleye are still being picked up on mid-lake humps, but many of those fish have moved in shallower to weed edges and right in the weeds in many cases, especially near shoreline breaks. Pike are plentiful and have their fall feed bag on, and the cooler weather temps have got the muskies bulking up for the winter as well. Flows on area rivers have increased after the rain we got, but they were low before the rain, so we're just now at about seasonal levels, which is actually still pretty low. So a little more detail we'll get into up here on Cherokee Marsh on the north side at Cherokee Park. The weeds are continue to come down there, opening up opportunities for shore anglers, but still pretty weedy. If you got a small boat, canoe, or kayak, you can launch here at the School Road launch and get out into the channel and have a little more weed-free options. The 113 bridge area, I haven't heard much out of the catfish anglers, but cut bait, super effective this time of year for the catfish, and I have heard about some walleyes coming out of there lately. Like I said, on Lake Mendota, the bluegills on the weed lines are keeping folks busy, and some nice fish being found. Also on mid-lake humps, so we're talking about like Dunn's Bar, Brearley Bars, Second Point, Commodore, Picnic Point to some extent, but a lot of those areas are holding gills, but some of the gills are starting to move in shallow as well. Perch action, like I said, has been basically non-existent. A lot of small fish being caught. I do hear about the occasional crappie here and there, but those fish are scattered at best. Largemouth bass action is good up shallow. Smallmouth bass action has been great, especially for folks running minnows under a slip bobber. Walleye are being picked up on mid-lake humps, but also starting to show up shallow on weed edges and right in the weeds near shoreline breaks. Noah Humfeld was telling me he's been getting walleyes this last week, sometimes in just 1 foot of water. So if you think you're too shallow, you probably aren't. I'm also hearing about some good action from shore anglers, mostly at night, in areas like the University Shoreline, Tenney, and Warner breakwalls. Extra large fatheads and blacktail chubs have been working well. But otherwise, running jerkbaits on a paddle tail, on a jig, are also super effective this time of year. Tenney Park action, like I mentioned, has been good near the locks, but also with this rain we got last week, there's more water flowing through the lock and dam there. And so below there, they've been getting some walleyes and some bluegills down there, some decent bass action down the river, some big largemouth bass in the Tenney Park Lagoon, and a lot of tiny bluegills in there too. Down on Lake Monona, a lot of the bluegills that were suspended have moved in shallow. A lot of those fish sounds like are stacking up here in Monona Bay, so a lot of good action that I've heard coming out of Brittingham Park and the Triangles. Some good bluegill action up here to the Monona Terrace Wall. Folks out there are getting good fish during the day, and it sounds like the size is improving. Good crappie bite out there in the evening. The bluegills have been on more of like an ice fishing jig with a red worm or a couple spikes on. Crappie folks been getting them on little crappie minnows or little plastic crappie imitations on a jig under a slip bobber or jig right off the side of the wall there. Also some walleye coming out of that area and down along the John Nolan Drive area, and that action's only going to improve as things get colder here. Lake Wingra, haven't heard much in the way of big panfish action or good panfish action they were getting out of the spillway over here. But of course, there's the lake's full of tiny bluegills and some good bass action to be had, and of course some muskie in there too. Speaking of muskie, the muskie action's been improving on Lake Monona. Got a lot of folks coming in the shop picking up the 12 to 16-inch muskie suckers we got here, and those folks have been having some good reports for me. Down on Upper Mud Lake, I should say too, as we get into turnover, especially on Lake Monona and Wabisa, that muskie bite is really gonna, the sucker muskie bite is really gonna improve. It'd be real hot then after the turnover. On Upper Mud, the weeds are coming down. Haven't heard much from the bass folks, but it sounds like a great panfish bite down there. Those fish, just like over on Monona Bay, are moving into the shallow areas, getting ready for winter. Lake Wabisa, a lot like Lake Monona, the suspended gills are moving in shallow. I was talking to Brian Zucke the other day. He was saying he's been finding some real nice gills on Wabisa on shallow humps. So if you look at a lake map, you've got some shallow humps off Hog Island over here. There's a little ridge off the Green Lantern. There's areas down here near Christie's and Goodland Park. But any of those shallow humps have been holding fish. Otherwise, Wabisa, has been producing some good walleye action, I've heard, around Babcock Park down to Bible Camp. And of course, the muskie bite down there is also really good this time of year. I mentioned that Lake Kiganza has turned over. It sounds like it sounds like it was pretty nasty and gross earlier this week, which is a sure sign that a lake has turned over. So I haven't heard much for reports, but if I was fishing down there, I'd do weed lines for gills and the area in front of the state park for walleyes. On Lake Kashkonong, I've been hearing about some increased walleye and sauger action, mostly near where the river dumps in up here in the Black Hawk Island area. Indian Ford and Jefferson dams have been producing a nice mixed bag of fish, including some white bass and the occasional flathead catfish coming out of there. I do a weekly fishing report with Wade at WBEV Radio out of Beaver Dam. He told me that the shore fishing on Beaver Dam Lake has been really good. Some white bass and some walleye, and of course a lot of eater catfish coming out of there. Crystal Lake continues to produce a great yellow bass bite. Devil's Lake, I haven't heard about the trout turning on yet, but once these lakes cool down and the lakes turn over, you're going to have browns cruising these shallow shorelines again, and those fish will be hungry. Super great time of year to be out there. The Wisconsin River, like I mentioned, the levels are back up, but they're certainly not high, just at seasonal averages for this time of year. If you're fishing downriver, look for deeper water on the backsides of sandbars, outside edges of turns, corners. Hearing about some good action up at the Prairie du Sac Dam. Walleye and sauger starting to show up. Also hearing about sturgeon and flathead catfish mixing it up for folks. Good muskie action from the dam here all the way down to Highway 12. I know is a really popular spot, and folks getting good pike in there as well. The action on Lake Wisconsin sounds like it's been improving from what I hear from folks. Sounds like the walleye numbers and size have been improving around the lake. No specifics on where they're catching fish, but I hear a lot of the bays have been holding some good panfish action. So you got Moon Valley, Sunset Bay, Harmony Grove, areas like that. The Grade been holding some good panfish. So that's definitely some action that's been picking up there. Portage to Wisconsin Dell, great smallmouth water up there. Heard about some good white bass action up at the Dells, and I'm sure the walleye and sauger are starting to stack up below the dam there. Action below the Castle Rock Dam is bound to be good. It's a good mixed bag up there. I haven't heard anything specific out of there or Castle Rock Lake itself. Petenwell Dam is always a good spot. Some nice muskies in there and a nice mixed bag of fish, maybe some flathead catfish. Petenwell Dam Lake sounds like it's been fishing really well lately, though, with some good walleye action ranging from 4 to 20 feet of water. Sounds like minnows have been best under a jig or a slip bobber, but bigger minnows have been producing some bigger fish, it sounds like, from what I've been hearing from folks. Otherwise, over to the Mississippi River, sounds like the folks at the Clements Barge near Genoa have been reporting increased walleye and sauger action. Sounds like folks fishing up and down the river from across all the way down to Prairie du Chien have been finding perch on weed lines. Sounds like gills pretty much everywhere else. Crappies in wood, walleyes and smallmouth bass on wing dams. So that's a good bite that's been going on lately. But really the biggest news, I think, for me anyway, is the salmon are starting to run up the tributaries on the Wisconsin River. So you got the Root River down in Racine. You've got the Menominee River. You got Milwaukee River, Sauk Creek, Sheboygan River, all the way up the East Coast. All those rivers are full of salmon right now. So if you want to maybe a little different experience, go over there. And you can see these fish swimming around all over. Sometimes up to 25 pounds. It's super impressive. These king salmon are up in the rivers right now. I've heard about as the water temperatures cool down, you're going to have browns and some steelhead moving in, and I've heard about some browns and steelhead that are already up in the rivers a little bit, although not in big numbers. The coho salmon should be right behind those king salmon, and those fish will remain up in the rivers until November. So yeah, super exciting time of year, and when I'm over there, I like fishing on the fly rod. I like fishing a cone head, like woolly bugger, something to get me down there with like an egg pattern trailer. On the spinning gear side of things, drifting egg sacs under bobbers, or paddle tails and spoons are good for the fish. So a lot of different options for folks catching fish over there in the tribs. Of course, inland trout season is closed right now. That doesn't mean we can't have a happy fly day report. So, I was talking about eggs later. This is what I'm talking about. I got a couple different sizes here at the shop. These are size 10. These are size 14s. Running those underneath something that's weighted can be super effective on the fly side of things. Otherwise, I also like to run these beads. Super effective for trout and the steelhead. But you can run these on a fly rod or, with some floats under a spinning gear. So also a very effective way to get fish this time of year. So if you're looking for something a little different, change of pace, head over there. It's a great time. I guess that pretty much does it for the report. Feel free if you want to call the shop here, 241-4225. We can try to expand on anything I talked about here. Otherwise, post your comments and catches below. And yeah, appreciate you tuning in, and we will talk next week. Thanks so much.